Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me. I'm glad you're here. I was going to film outside, as my thumbnail would indicate, but there was a lot of lawn care noise that started right after Suki and I got in, and I went outside to start filming. So I started talking, and then so I just thought, well, that's going to be too distracting. Hello, how are all of you? My name's Renee, by the way. It's July. And yeah, I don't know if I talked about the last time I filmed, I don't know if I talked about our quick trip to Frederick, Maryland, but we went there. It's one of our favorite towns. We used to live in Baltimore County, and we did a rail trail ride. It's the C&O Canal towpath. I think I did talk about this, but yeah, Frederick. Wonderful restaurant scene, lovely town. I went running in the morning and a couple of the mornings, and just truly a beautiful place, very centrally located, near, not very far from the Pennsylvania border. So there's Hagerstown, and then there would be Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and then and Shippensburg, which is where my son used to live, and then maybe 45 minutes to Baltimore County, like Lutherville. This weekend, we had to make a quick trip to Albany, New York, to go to a funeral. And Albany is the state capital of New York State, for those of you who are not in the US. And I really like capital cities in states. I lived in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania for quite a while, and just absolutely loved being in a capital city. It usually means that you've got beautiful architecture, not only the state capital, but state buildings. And these are towns often that are old. So Harrisburg and Albany have that in common, and they both have like beautifully restored Victorian townhomes and walk-ups and cobblestone streets, which were really wonderful. I ran around the neighborhood, which is kind of like the Lark Street neighborhood. For those of you that know Albany, we stayed in an Airbnb that was right along the park, Washington Park, on Madison Avenue or Street. A strong restaurant scene, just like in Harrisburg. State capitals tend to have very decent restaurants, if not wonderful restaurants. And we went to a restaurant called Dove and Deer, and had dinner on the sidewalk. And so we got to really, this was like a locals restaurant. And so we got to see and be around a lot of locals and just feel like we were in the mix. And it was really cool. So, and wonderful espresso coffee house. When we were leaving on Lark Street, we stopped at Stack's Espresso Bar, which was, again, just full of like the locals. This is their local coffee shop. They walk up there, and really nice. And so on that trip, when I go on a trip, I like to take a book that is like the right kind of travel book for me. I've had trouble with taking books that are more ethereal or esoteric, I guess, in nature, and that have philosophical ideas, for instance. Because if I'm reading at night, which is when I would be reading on most trips that I take, I just want something I can dig that my tired brain can easily understand and pick up and leave off. And that usually means something kind of plot driven. I remember the first time I took an Anthony Trollope on a trip, The Warden, and from then on I was like, okay, I was reading the series anyway, so that worked out well. And then and Anita Bruckner is usually a very good. Even though they're not heavily plot driven, their characters are, I don't want to say simple, but they're easy to understand, even though they may be complex and the entanglements with people and love affairs and things like that could be, and family could be a little more complex. That's what I usually am able to easily read. God, that's such a bad sentence. Anyway, so to pick up where I left off when we were last talking, the last time I had just started D.H. Lawrence's Women in Love, this beautiful O'Donnell penguin spine. And I was commenting about like how ethereal, how esoteric this story is, this writing is. It continues as I'm like almost halfway through. There continues to be a lot of conversations between the two men characters and then the men with the women. A lot of conversations about the meaning of life, if religion plays a role, what love is, and does one even need love to be with someone? I mean, really interesting and not simple themes in this book. I was really surprised by that. Like I wasn't expecting that kind of writing. It's kind of like the what did I call it? I don't know. It's like the romantic version of Ulysses by James Joyce, except I haven't read Ulysses, so I don't know. But I feel like, because we're talking about two sisters who are each in love with someone. So it's Ursula and Gudrun Brangwen, and they are both in love with separate men, not the same one. But these men couldn't be different from each other, and they are now sometimes together and finding differences and similarities. Really cool. This book is supposed to be loosely a second in a series, and the first one is called The Rainbow, which I didn't read. This is a book that was written in at the turn of the 20th century, around 1920. I don't remember the date now. So when I was going to Albany, I knew I wasn't going to take this book because I just need to have a little bit of brain energy for this. And so I was and still reading The Dud Avocado, which I'll get to in a second. And I could have taken this, but I thought it was a good reason to pick up E.M. Forster's A Room with a View, which I'd gotten out of the library because I really wanted to read it after I was done with D.H. Lawrence. And I read two E.M. Forsters a year ago or so, and it was part of a read-along. I read Where Angels Fear to Tread, E.M. Forster's first book, and then we read Howard's End. I really enjoyed both. This one, I started before we left, so I had a little bit of a basis. It's got a bit of a different tone. This is written later in the entire oeuvre, and it says, a charming tale of the battle between bourgeois repression and radical romanticism. Oh, it's his third novel and has long been the most popular of his early works. So we're talking about Lucy Honeychurch, who's gone to Italy, Florence, Italy, with her chaperone, products of proper Edwardian England. And they are bumping up against some rougher characters in different class systems in the hotel they're staying at, which at first was a little annoying to me because it just felt like, oh, is Lucy such a snob? I didn't like Lucy. I'm very neutral on Lucy. But I mean, based on when this was written, this is reality. This is Edwardian England, and it is also written in 1908. It was published. It has an introduction by Radhika Jones that I'm really itching to read, but I'm not going to. I want to read it after I'm finished, so I'm very eager. I'm almost halfway through. It's picked up. We know there is going to be some entanglement with Lucy, the proper Lucy, who's young. So that gives her a little bit more desire to do things that are outside the bounds of the strictness that she's grown up in and also enveloped in, with her chaperone and with other ladies at this hotel. But she does have those shackles on. I mean, it's just part of her makeup. And they meet these two men, the Emersons, and one of them is the younger George Emerson. And we know there's something that's going to happen. I don't know that for sure. I haven't read the whole blurb because I wanted to save myself, but we know something's going to happen there. And so I'm interested in it. But I have to say, so far, the two other E.M. Foresters I read were, I think I liked them better from the start because I don't know, I just felt like they were less well-to-do, like right from the gate, where Angel's Fear to Tread has a really uncharacteristic for its time character, who is a young widow and then decides she wants to go off to Italy. Everything she's doing is very uncommon. And so that's the tone of that book. And then Howard's End, I just feel like that's more about family and the little area that the book takes place. And there's some things that are happening plot-wise that have some people askew, and the bumping up against people from different walks of life happens very early, and it's a part of the story. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see about this one. I'm maybe a third in, not very far. But this was the perfect travel book, I have to say. It was very easy to follow. No matter how tired I was, I could just plop right in. Okay, The Dud Avocado. Oh my God. I don't remember this being as, like, not slapstick funny, but the scenes that Elaine Dundee can write, some of the scenes are so funny. I just got through this section, like I don't know, a little less than a third to go, but like I just got through this section where this is kind of done in a loose diary style. Like sometimes you'll have diary entries, so the page is chopped up like that, but most of it is pretty longer diary entries. So then, you know, it wouldn't be unusual for it to look like that. But Sally J. Gorse is writing a diary, and she has come to Paris. Is this, when is it? In the 1950s, in the late 1950s. And there are some people from America that she's American that she knows, or maybe it's from college, and she is a amateur actress, so she's gotten a part or so in a play that one of the other Americans she knows has put on. And so they were supposed to be, her and I think it's Larry and this other guy named Bax are supposed to be auditioning for a part in a movie, and they get the parts, but then they find out they're extras, and they're so extra, like they're part of a crowd extra, and they're so unattached from what's actually happening in the movie, but they have to be there and on set by 7 a.m. So that's the insult to the whole thing, is like they're not getting paid very much. They're like out in a crowd, and they're so far out in a crowd. I think they're filming this, you know, in or just outside of Paris, and they're so far in the background that they've decided, her and her friend, this other young lady, have decided that there are some people, some locals around where they're shooting, and they've invited them in for coffee. I think it's this older lady. And so every morning they just disappear for an hour drinking coffee in this woman's house, and nobody notices. Oh, it's just so funny. So she was not, so she's having an affair with some Italian guy when the story opens. There's an American named Jim that she thinks that she really wants to get the attention of, but then in this while Jim is in Paris, he meets a woman named Judy, and Sally can see that Jim and Judy are meant for each other. And Jim goes away and um, goes back to America, and she gets a letter that says, "Oh, by the way, Gorse, I'm getting married to Judy. I hope you're not disappointed. I've decided not to mention you to Judy that we had a relationship." Um, and so there's a diary entry that opens up. Have been crying steadily ever since 2 o'clock this afternoon when I came back and found Jim's letter waiting for me. I sat down and replied to it immediately, tears splashing all over the pages and my hand trembling. I sealed it and sent it without even rereading. It'll probably make me curl up and die in a couple of days, but I can't help that. Here's a mystery. It's a phony letter, her letter to Jim. It's a phony letter, all right, but there's nothing phony about my grief. This has been the worst day of my life so far. Jim is getting married. He's marrying Judy. He wrote me all about it. So on, so on. What the hell is the matter with me anyway? Why have I written that monstrously awful letter begging him not to go through with it, swearing black and blue I've never loved anyone but him, that I only came down here in the first place to test us? I mean, lies. Nothing but lies. And yet I know I wouldn't get that letter out of the mailbox, even if I could. Nor will I write him another canceling the first. My grief is too real, and my tears and my pain. Someone quite independent of myself is taking control. I can only obey. It's no good saying over and over again, but you didn't want him. You didn't want him. It's worse than no good. I mean, it makes the whole thing worse because now I do want him. It's so smart. It's so whippy smart. It's so funny. It's the perfect summer book. I'm getting so much more out of this the second time. I really am. I think because there's just so much you're taking in, so much just action and fun the first time. I don't know, but I'm really enjoying it the second time. The Dud Avocado by Elaine Dundee. Perfect for traveling with, for being out and about in the sun. Like, yeah, it doesn't get any better. Oh, and while I was reading the D.H. Lawrence, just to put I wanted to learn more about the context of D.H. Lawrence writing Women in Love and then The Rainbow. I started reading parts of this Penguin classic that I got at a used bookstore, which is D.H. Lawrence's Selected Letters. And this is, oh my gosh, this is in very crumbly shape, so I have to be very careful. But he's writing a lot to his editor, and it's really cool. I've really enjoyed dipping in and out of this. But alas, I have not gone back to the D.H. Lawrence. I mean, now because I'm engaged with A Room with a View, I guess I won't be. But I don't know if I will. I just don't know. We'll see. We'll see what kind of mood I'm in after I'm done with this. This is a library book, so I want to get it back, and I just want to keep going with this story. I am really happy to be back in E.M. Forster land, I have to say. And then I don't know if I mentioned this on Instagram, but I got this. This is a new release called The Editor: How Publishing Legend Judith Jones Shaped Culture in America. It's written by Sarah Franklin. Yeah, Sarah Franklin. She's a writer, teacher, and oral historian. And Judith Jones worked for, is it Doubleday? Is that, or Knopf? Yeah. She spent most of her time at Knopf. But how did she get to Knopf? This is after the war, after the Second World War. She began working at Doubleday's office in Paris in 1949. So she had already done, I think she had worked for a literary agent or a publishing house in the US before she went to Paris in 1949. So it's really cool how she describes arriving in Paris and what Paris is like after being occupied during the war, and how Paris is still affected by that experience when she arrived. It's really interesting. And I really like this writing. I think at times it could be a little verbose, but the story of Judith Jones, like it's like hopping on a train and just going. She's amazing. She's fighting all the stereotypes without sometimes even knowing that that she's just driven to work in the literary world and and not get married as the first thing that she does. She goes to a college that is not a college that's necessarily for women just looking to get married. I forget which college it is. And she wants to start working right after college. And her parents are supportive to a point. They're just hoping she meets Mr. Right, of course, given the time. The most amazing part of the story that I've read, just 42 pages in, is a situation at, where is she working? Oh, I think this is after she's already at Doubleday in Paris. Paris opened up a Doubleday opened up a Paris branch. She is low level. She is working for an editor, and the editor gives her a stack of manuscripts and says, these are going to be rejected. It's a slush pile, unsolicited manuscripts that have been sent in by hopeful agents and foreign publishers. Price had determined, Price meaning her boss, Price had determined those in the stock on Judith's desk weren't good fits for Doubleday, and so Judith went to work on the polite pass letters. Then she starts to read the book that was a first-person account written by a Jewish girl born in Germany and raised in the Netherlands. In 1942, when she was 13, two families, the girls and another, moved into a series of secret rooms behind her father's office. They lived there hiding from the Nazis for 2 years. You know what book I'm talking about, right? Right. The way in which the way that she describes, I don't think I've read or heard this for a while, but the way that Anne Frank takes her little diary that she's keeping while they're in this hiding place and realizes or hears that after the war, any scrap of any diary will be used as a part of the documentation of people during the war. She starts to turn her diary into something, knowing that should she and her family perish, that there will be an accounting, at least from her, a 13-year-old girl, of her experience. My God. And yeah, we can thank Judith Jones for Doubleday publishing that book. I don't know whether it would have ever been published in the US after that or not, had it been passed on, but at least we know Judith Jones, the low-level secretarial-like job that she had, raised this up to the point where it got published. It had already been published in different European countries, but it was published in the US by Doubleday. 42 pages in. Oh, that was so well written. That part was so well written. So they're now back in the US and struggling, really struggling. I say they because she met someone. I won't go into that story because it's a story in and of itself. And yeah, I'm really, I couldn't recommend this enough. So what's on the horizon? I am going to be having a conversation with Nora on Instagram. I will put her Instagram name here. She does these lovely live Sunday reads, and she's invited me to just chat about books soon. So I'm delighted. I'm delighted. I love Nora. She's absolutely lovely. I get all kinds of book recommendations from her. So she just recommended It Lasts Forever and Then It's Over. She read that book by Anne DeMarkin. I had that book out of the library when it was first published in the US, and I read the first page, which she talks about in one of her Friday reels, which you can look at on her Instagram page. And I just never got to it. I loved the first page, and I loved the interview between David Naiman and Anne DeMarkin on Between the Covers, one of my favorite podcasts. And then I heard Nora talking about it, and it just like lit the fire again. So I'm getting that book out of the library again as a hold. So I'm looking forward to that. Then I want to mention two booktubers that have influenced what I'll be reading next too. That is Charles Heathcote. Check out his channel. He is a lovely author of a Doris book series that you'll read about on his Booktube channel. He is in the countryside in the UK, and he just does a really good job of vlogging his weekly life and talking about the writing process and what he's reading. He's always reading something interesting, and he right now is reading through his collection of Elizabeth Taylors. And so he's gotten me back into thinking about Elizabeth Taylor because I've only read Mrs. Palfrey at the Claremont, and I really liked it. So I'm gauging by his reading experiences as some of his Elizabeth Taylors which one I would pick up. But yeah, he's really fun and gives me a lot of reading ideas. Then Catherine, another booktuber, fairly new to me anyway. I'll link both of these channels below. She loves classics. She just did a video ranking the classics that she's read, or at least some of them. And what's so brilliant about that video is that, sure, she's ranking them, but then she's kind of going into her reading experience of them. So then you get to know a little bit more about that classic, or at least be reminded. So it's just a brilliant video concept. And then, and so it was either that video or one of the videos on classics that reminded me that I wanted to read Lolita by Nabokov. So that's on my list again. And then the June video that she just did talking about the book she read in June reminded me that I want to read Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. Her reading experience of that is influential. And Picnic at Hanging Rock. I don't remember who the author is, but I'll put that down here. Yeah, I've always wanted to read that, and she's just read it, and it's now back on my radar. So you'll probably want to read it too after you listen to her talk about it. I mean, it was really cool. And then it also reminded me that I needed to watch the movie. So yeah, that was fun. I have a bunch of book reminders now written down on my whiteboard. So please let me know what you're reading. What are you into this summer? I'd love to know. Let me know if you have any thoughts about any of the books that I talked about here. D.H. Lawrence, E.M. Forster, and the Dud Avocado. I hope you're having a wonderful summer. Thank you for joining me again. I look forward to seeing you on the next one.